The storm had no grace to it. It fell hard and fast across the ridgeline, clawing at the dark with sleet and wind like teeth. Pines bent and snapped along the pass, and the trail turned to slurry before a man could blink. By the time Arthur spotted the bluff's edge, he was already soaked to the spine, his coat heavy, his horse slick and rattled beneath him. He hadn't meant to ride this far. He hadn't meant to ride at all. But something in him had stirred that morning, something cold and tight and restless, and he'd saddled up and gone without looking back. He rarely did. The world below was gray on gray. Rock, sky, snowmelt river curling white through the gulch. And there, just near the floodplain where the trees thinned and the land bowed, he saw it, a shape. A smear of blue against mud, motionless. He didn't think. He nudged the mare forward, slid from the saddle, boots sinking ankle deep. She was there, slumped beneath a twisted pine, dress torn at the hem, one shoe missing, hair clinging in wet strands to her cheek. Her skin looked cold enough to crack. He crouched near. She breathed, but barely. Eyes open, not blind, but distant. He didn't speak at first. Words seemed foolish beside her silence. Then he offered the coat. She didn't flinch. When he lifted her, her ribs pressed sharp against his arm. Light. Broken, maybe, or near it. He didn't ask who she was. Didn't offer a name. He placed her on the saddle and climbed behind, letting her weight settle where it could. Her head leaned, barely, against his collarbone. Not trust, survival. They rode west, through sleet and silence, into country he remembered from another life. A hunting shack, half buried in rockfall, long since abandoned but dry. The trail disappeared twice. His horse staggered once on a shale ridge. Still they rode. By dusk, the shack stood ahead, hunched against the wind, roof patched with tin and prayer. He dismounted, teeth chattering, and lifted her slow. Her breath caught. He wasn't sure if it was fear or pain. Inside was rot and ash and dust, but he had fire starting in his hands before his brain caught up. She sat near the hearth, arms around her knees, dripping onto the floor. He offered food. She didn't speak. Just took the cup, warmed her fingers against it like it meant something. Maybe it did. He watched her without watching. Just enough to know she wasn't fading. Just enough to know he couldn't stop. When sleep came, he sat near the door, gun resting across his knees. Not from fear, from habit. In the morning, mist braided the hills and the storm moved east. She slept with her face turned to the wall. Alive. Whole, maybe, but not yet returned. She had a name. He could feel it. Not yet spoken, but there. He hadn't found her. Not exactly. She'd been waiting where the storm would bring someone, and he had been the one the storm chose to find her. The days folded into one another like pages turned slow. The storm passed, but its breath lingered in the cracks of the shack and the cold seams of their silence. Arthur rose before the sun, boots on, fire lit, coffee boiled. She never stirred at the sound. Her name remained unspoken, her voice rare. But each morning she sat nearer to the hearth, wrapped in the old coat, hands no longer trembling as they held the tin cup. Her eyes stayed low, watching flames like they held something the world outside had lost. He didn't ask. He split wood, checked the roofline, cleaned the rifle. She watched from the stoop sometimes, face still pale but steadier now. Once she took the axe when he paused, gripped it wrong, split one knot, handed it back, said nothing. But he remembered how her hands had bled the night he found her. They spoke little. A nod, a gesture, that was enough. On the fourth day, she sat by the window, fingers tracing fog on the glass. He brewed coffee and slid a cup her way. She took it, no thanks, but steadier than before. "You got folks?" he asked, voice low, not pressing. She waited a long time. Then, "Not anymore." Another pause. Her shoulders shifted. "North. Farm used to be. Don't know if it's still there." That night, after she'd drifted to sleep, he sat by the hearth, watching the flames gnaw old wood. Her breath hitched once, in a dream maybe. Her hand curled over the blanket like she was holding onto something far off. The next day, she helped with the roof. Fingers numb, balance unsteady, but she didn't stop, didn't complain. He offered his hand once when the board slipped. She took it. Her touch didn't flinch. Later, inside, she braced a beam while he hammered. "June," she said. He looked up. "Arthur." They said nothing more, but that changed something. Not the world, not the sky, but the quiet between them. He didn't look away that evening, not when she brushed her hair back by the fire, not when her gaze met his and didn't break. It wasn't love. It wasn't hope. It was two people still breathing when they shouldn't be, and beginning, maybe, to remember how. They left at dawn, saddle packs light, sky still bruised with frost. June didn't speak, just rode ahead, her shoulders squared, eyes on the ridgeline like the past might still be waiting there, crouched low in the grass. Arthur followed. He didn't ask how far, didn't ask what they'd find. He already knew it wouldn't be standing. The trail east bent through burned pine and broken fence posts. They passed a church once, nothing left but stone footing and a single charred beam pointing skyward. June paused, looking at it with an expression between grief and defiance. "We were married in one like that," she said. He didn't answer. She hadn't asked. On the fifth day, they crested a hill and saw it, the place that had been her home. No roof, no walls, just ribs of timber jutting from the earth like bones. Wildflowers had crept in through what used to be floorboards. The orchard beyond was bare but standing, limbs twisted, stubborn against wind. June dismounted first, walked slow. Her boots crushed the hearthstone. She moved as if tracing memories underfoot. Near what once was the porch, she crouched, touched the dirt. He stayed back. "Then he did this because I wouldn't leave." Her voice wasn't bitter, just tired. "I fought for this land. My mother's bones are buried here. I couldn't let it go." Arthur approached, slow, said nothing. He felt the weight of the silence between her words. "I buried him," she added. He understood without asking. "I tracked him, took back what he stole, put him where no one will find him." She looked at him like daring him to judge. He didn't. He nodded once. "You did what you had to." That night they pitched camp near the orchard, under a tree that still held bloom. She sat with her knees drawn, eyes on the ruins. He brought stew in a tin. "What now?" he asked. "I rebuild. Slowly, piece by piece." He nodded again. "I can help, if you want." "I do." No smile, but her fingers brushed his as she took the bowl. He felt that for hours. Summer didn't arrive. It settled, quiet like a breath held long. The land didn't bloom all at once. It crept back, thread by thread. Shoots of green broke through ash. Bees returned to the orchard. The soil darkened, heavy with memory, ready again to carry weight. Arthur never said he'd stay. He just didn't leave. Boots on before the kettle boiled, tools in hand before the birds woke. June didn't ask. She always made enough for two. They built a shed first, low, tight, windproof. Then a fence. Goats from a neighbor 3 valleys east. She learned to ride smoother. He taught her how to see a storm coming by how the grass leaned. She showed him how to mend shirts with cleaner stitches and find onions in the brush by scent alone. The days had shape. Cut wood, carry water, boil wash, fix what needed fixing. They didn't speak much, but silence softened, became something they shared. One morning she brought in a sparrow, broken wing, soaked, shivering. She set it in a box lined with wool, fed it soaked bread from her hand, didn't name it, just tended it. He watched her from the doorway. Think it'll fly again? She didn't look up. Don't know, but it wants to? That's something. He thought about that longer than he meant to. That evening, she stood beside him at the fence, arms crossed, eyes on the hills. Her presence was enough. When the bird vanished, he found it in the rafters, whole, watching. She smiled, real and brief. It stayed with him. Later, she came outside, stood beside him while he chopped wood, not to help, just to be there. By the end of July, they had tomatoes in the ground, a clothesline strung between 2 trees, and a new comb he carved for her from pine. She left it on the windowsill, but used it each morning. They danced once. No music but the wind. He'd found an old fiddle in the rafters, tuned it by feel. She stepped into his arms like she'd done it before. Dirt under their boots, starlight in her hair. They didn't speak, didn't need to. He looked at her and, for once, didn't feel like a man trying to outrun something. She looked back and didn't flinch. Winter came back without warning, first with frost, then with silence. Snow layered the roof by inches, settled into the seams of the fence, softened the orchard until it looked like memory more than place. They didn't mark the days, just moved through them. Firewood stacked, goats fed, water melted from ice. She baked sometimes, not for occasion, just to make the house smell like something warm. He carved small things, spoons, pegs, a drawer pull when the old one splintered. She leaned over the stove most mornings, hair tucked back, sleeves rolled. He'd watch from the table, cup in hand, and never once did she ask why. He didn't speak often, but when he passed her a cup, she'd take it without looking, and sometimes their fingers brushed. She used the comb he made, kept it on the sill. He noticed when it went missing for a day, then returned. The wind shook the house at night. He'd wake to creaks and hisses in the dark, and always found her still breathing, turned toward the wall, blanket drawn high. He never moved closer, just watched. One night she touched his hand without meaning to, passed a bowl, let her fingers linger. He didn't speak, but she left them there a second longer than she had to. That evening he carved her name into the underside of the chair he'd built for her. Not bold, not deep, just enough. When the snow fell thick enough to hide the trail, he went out alone, checked the perimeter, made sure the goats hadn't broken the fence. When he came back, she'd swept the floor, left a piece of cornbread by the stove. They didn't dance again, not like before. But one night, when the wind had quieted and the moon burned clean through the frost fog, she stepped to where he sat and rested her head against his chest. They stayed that way. No motion, no need. The next morning, she watched the hills like always, but her shoulders were at rest. He leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, boots wet with melt. He never asked her why she stayed, and she never asked him why he didn't leave. Dear friends, some stories don't end. They just stay, like frost, like memory. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more. Because out here, Silence says more than words. And those who stay matter most. Stay sharp, stay ready, and keep your eyes on the horizon.